All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our Brunch and Learn today. We have NDSBA's Executive Director, Alexis Baxley, with us. Many of you already know or know of Alexis and all the great work she does. Today, she will be presenting to you about the 2023 legislative session and the important topics that you should be in the know about. During the presentation, you may pose any questions you have in the Q&A feature, and I will do my best to moderate them in as we go or get them answered at the end. And now I will hand it over to Alexis.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I hope it's not snowing where you are like it's snowing here in Bismarck. I was kind of under the impression that when it's this cold, it's not going to snow anymore. Unfortunately, I guess we get the best of both worlds here. So let me get my slides up here. All right. So as Taylor said, we're going to talk this morning about the 2023 legislative session. If you've been a school board member or paid attention to NDSBA for a while, you kind of know the drill, but we've got lots of fun new stuff coming up this year. So wanted to make sure that everybody is in the know and knows how to stay in the know once session starts. So first, let's make sure my slides advance. There we go. First, I want to touch on just kind of the calendar or the schedule for legislative session. We had organizational session at the first week of December. That gave us committee assignments, committee structure, leadership election, the governor's budget address, all sorts of sort of preparatory work to get us ready for that January 3rd start date. This is, I believe, the second earliest date for a session that I've ever participated in. I do recall one starting on January 2nd. Everybody was extra grumpy at the start of that session. Nobody was quite ready to be back to work yet. But we will see bill deadlines mid to late January, and then crossover on February 24th. For those of you that are kind of new to the process, crossover is kind of what we refer to as halftime, meaning that all bills have to be out of their house of origin by this date, so that the second body can begin working on them for the second half of session. If you're a hockey fan, it's more like 3 periods than 2 halves, but we'll just continue to mix our sports analogies, whichever way we please. So after crossover, they take a short break that Monday and Tuesday, February 27th to 28th. They come back on March 1st. And then as of now, April 28th is day 80. You likely know that constitutionally, they're limited to 80 legislative days. I say for now, because a day does not count towards that total unless they gavel in for floor session. So this count includes a couple of days in that first few weeks where they're planning on not gaveling in. But I fully expect them to have a few more days, particularly the first couple of days when they reconvene after crossover, maybe a few more towards the end while they're working through committee work that would push day 80 into the first week of May. So hopefully we don't use all 80 days. We have not used all 80 days during this session for a number of bienniums now. They like to save a few just in case they need to come back later. But I anticipate that we're going to have a large number of bills and a large number of issues that are going to make saving days a little bit difficult. The typical day during legislative session, committee hearings in the morning, a brief break for lunch, floor session, usually starting at 1. That 1 to 2 is typical. It goes a lot longer when we get close to crossover or close to the end of session, or much shorter when we are at the start or right after crossover when there aren't that many bills out of committee to be discussed on the floor yet. And then resume committee hearings in the afternoon. So I share this because if you are looking to watch committee hearings, pay attention to floor session, this is kind of how you can set your expectations. It also usually means that I and Amy are most reachable in that 12 to 2 period, depending on the day. So if you're looking to get a hold of us and it's early in the morning and you can't get a hold of us, that's probably why we're sitting in those committee hearings. So education is an A committee. which means that it meets Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday for both the Senate and the House. So again, if you're looking to get a hold of us, Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays are by far our busiest days, where we spend the most time at the Capitol. So 2023, a new session. I'm sure you're all like, well, yeah, Alexis, every single session is a new session. That's true, but we have a little bit of a theme, or I've decided I'm going to call it a theme this session, that everything is new. So first, we have a lot of new faces. I'm sure that you all have kind of been paying attention to elections in November, and you know, we have 141 legislators, 47 in the Senate, 94, if my math is correct, in the House. Of those seats, you can see that we've got 25 to almost 30% in the House are new faces. There are a couple of folks in that count that, there's one individual who's served as a House member before, moved out of his district, so was no longer a representative and is back, so has some experience. And then we have one senator that was formerly a House member, and then this will be his first session in the Senate. But what I want you to take away from this is that we have a lot of new people. This is a large number of freshman legislators. And freshman legislators are sometimes fantastic, but they do usually require a little bit more education on our part. Education in particular, as you likely know, can be complicated, particularly our funding formula. We've got legislators who have been working extensively with our funding formula for a decade, and they're still learning new things about it. So I kind of drive that point home to really say that we are going to have to focus as NDSBA and as school board members a lot on education this year. If you are familiar with any of the new senators and representatives, and you can reach out to them to build that relationship now, that would be very helpful for us from January to May. So there are a few notable new faces. I'm sure there are others that have an education background. I just am not as familiar with them, so hopefully we'll learn about them soon. Those that I am aware of, so in the Senate, and I'm not sure why Dean is listed as a D, he is a Republican, so what happens when I'm creating slides quickly. Dean Rummel out of Dickinson is a Republican in District 37. You may be familiar with Dean if you went to impasse in the last 10 to 15 years. Dean has served on the Fact-Finding Commission and as its chair for quite a number of years. He is not on the Education Committee, but is excited to work on education issues. In the House, we have Jim Jonas, who's a current school board member in West Fargo, and then Steve Swantek, who is a Republican out of Fargo, but is currently serving as a superintendent. So we are excited that out of all those new freshmen, we did pick up some familiar faces that are familiar with education and school boards and the issues that we face. In addition to all of the new faces that we have a lot of new leaders. And what that means for me as a lobbyist, for us as NDSBA, is that we're really going to have to focus in on continuing to build the relationships we have with these individuals. We had great relationships with the last set of leadership. But every leader does things a little bit differently. And so the processes we were sort of used to following are quite likely going to change. So we will have to figure it out as we go. As you see on the slide, every single leadership position in both the Senate and the House for both Republicans and Democrats, except for two, changes in 2023. So we have not much veteran leadership back at all. If we look at our majority and minority leaders, only Josh Boucher is a holdover from previous sessions. The House Majority Leader, Mike LaFleur out of Dickinson, is new to the position. Senator David Hogue out of Minot is new to the position. And then Senator Kathy Hogan has served as Assistant Minority Leader in the past, but this will be her first session as Minority Leader. Other leadership changes, just kind of a list here, names that you may recognize or may not. You know, an interesting one in the Senate, if you see the minority caucus leader, Ryan Braunberger, is a freshman. It's very, very rare for freshmen to have leadership positions, but the Senate only has 4 Democrats. So everybody had to either take a leadership position or serve on appropriations. So it will be interesting to see how the Democrats are able to handle the workload in the Senate. Another interesting one to note, President of the Senate, Tammy Miller. If you watched the news at all yesterday, you would have seen that Lieutenant Governor Brent Sanford, who serves as the president of the Senate, is resigning effective January 2nd. So Tammy Miller was appointed around 2 o'clock yesterday afternoon as the new lieutenant governor effective January 2nd. So she will be leading the Senate. It's always interesting to watch a new lieutenant governor learn the ways of the Senate, how to run the floor sessions. They essentially they are the chairman of floor sessions, and so a lot of how those sessions run depends on them and how they choose to run them. So Tammy will have the honor of presiding over the Senate on day 1 of the job. You also probably recognize Senator Don Shively's name on President Pro Tem. Don has in the past been chairman of our Senate Education Committee. President Pro Tem essentially serves as president of the Senate in absence of the lieutenant governor. So he did kind of take on a new leadership role as well. Few names in the House. You can see Speaker Dennis Johnson. He's a former Education Committee member, somebody that has always been a good friend of ours, and then a few other new names as well. As I mentioned before, Democrats are pretty sparse this session. They've been sparse for a while, but particularly so this session. 4 in the Senate, 12 in the House. What that means is that particularly in the Senate, not every committee will have a Democrat as we're used to seeing. It will make it very difficult for them to staff conference committees towards the end of session and the end of crossover. It will remain to be seen how well they do. Anecdotally, I've heard requests in the Bismarck area of them looking for party members to come and observe committee hearings where they don't have a legislator on the committee to be able to report back, just because you can only be in so many places at once. So it will be interesting to see what type of dynamic that creates. In addition to new faces and new leadership, we also have new committees. And I don't just mean new members on committees, because we have that all of the time, but we have a whole new committee structure in the Senate. For the first time, we've maybe added a committee since I've been at this for the last 15 years, but this is the first time we've really made this significant of amount of changes. So you see the old Senate committees there that we are accustomed to, and the new ones. We have gotten rid of Government and Veterans Affairs. We've moved the Veterans Affairs to the Agriculture Committee. Surprisingly enough, the Agriculture Committee doesn't have as many bills as it used to, and so they needed to pick up a little bit more subject matter to stay busy. And government has had a lot of bills the last few sessions. All of the election bills go through there. Often we see the retirement bills go through GBA, and so that has become the State and Local Government Committee, and I anticipate we will spend a fair amount of time there this legislative session. You also see that in the past we've had IBL, Industry and Business and Labor Committee. We maybe would hop over there for a bill or two each session, but not spend too much time there. They have separated out Industry and Business and then created a new Workforce Development Committee. Obviously, workforce development is an issue that education and every other industry in the state is concerned about. We don't have enough people to fill the jobs that we have. And the Senate is really going to focus on that, and I guess expecting a fair number of bills. So I anticipate we'll spend some time in that committee as well. I would expect that a number of CTE issues will end up going through. Appropriations is also sort of new. In the past, House has approached appropriations with kind of a divide and conquer mentality. You have an overall appropriations committee that is very large, and then they split into 3 different divisions and parse out the bills, the budgets to the various divisions. The Senate has historically just met as one whole committee, so that the entire committee has heard every single budget, worked on every single budget, and you know, it's been, I think it's been a good approach. I have appreciated working with Senate appropriators. It was a little bit more straightforward. They all had heard the budget, and so there was a little bit less educating to do once we got to the final stages. They are now going to take the same approach as the House. They're going to split into divisions. They have said that they still plan to have the full committee hear each of the budgets when they're presented for the first time. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. We, of course, have new committee chairmen in House and Senate appropriations. So those committees may run very differently than they have for the past 15 to 20 years or more. Dialing into our education committees, the House Education Committee, you can see it's 14 members. It's a pretty robust committee. We have a brand new chairman, Representative Pat Heiner. Pat has served on the committee in the past, has served as a legislative representative on the K-12 Coordination Council, is quite familiar, and I think will be great for us to work with. Cindy Schreiber-Beck from Southeast, kind of near Wapaton area, returns as vice chair. You can see the rest of the faces. Anyone with a red asterisk is new to the committee. So of the 14 members, half are freshmen. Half. Did I do my math there correctly? 1, 2, 3, 6, 7. Yeah. Half are freshmen, and that's significant. You know, again, we work through a lot of issues that folks think they have a handle on K-12 education because they got a high school diploma. But the reality is when we get into the weeds, it's more complicated than that. And so we'll be doing a fair amount of education there. Jim Jonas, you see, will join us on education. I think he's very excited about his committee assignments. We're excited to work with him. Liz Conley out of Fargo, Scott Dyke, I believe, Fargo, it might be Grand Forks, I might have that mixed up. Eric Murphy is a professor up from Grand Forks. Anna Novak is from the Beulah area. We're pretty excited. She is one of few women in either body that has school-age children in public school. We lost a number of those folks this interim, and I think that's an important perspective to have. And then we have Matt Heilman from Bismarck and Kelby Timmons up from the Williston area. Both are very young, new to politics, and so will be interesting to see how they develop as the session goes. You know, in the past, you've probably heard me say quite often, we'll fix it in the Senate. I'm not sure that we'll do that this year. We may do a little bit more work in the House. We'll have to see how things play out. So the Senate committee, again, to my point of we'll fix it in the Senate, historically, our Senate Education Committee has been very experienced, very knowledgeable, very reasonable, and great for us to work with. You see the numbers above all of the pictures. That's how many sessions on education each of these individuals have under their belt. If you look down in the bottom, top right, bottom left, Michelle Axton and Todd Beard. Todd is from the Williston area, Michelle from Bismarck. Both are freshmen in their first legislative sessions. Senators Conley, Lem, and Wabama. I believe Conley and Wabama are in their second session, so this will be their second session, both on education. Lem filled in, I believe, at the end of one previous session, was appointed to a seat, but did not sit on the education committee at that time. So this will only be his second session on the education committee. As you see, we have a new chair of Senate Ed, Senator Jay Elkin from the Richardson area. Senator Elkin, this will be his third session on education. He is very sharp, has a child that is a teacher, is very in tune, I think, with his local school district, and has kind of been groomed for this position for the last 12 to 24 months, really. But it is new. You know, Senator Shadley has done a great job in kind of managing this committee for a lot of years. I know he is kind of mentoring Senator Elkin, but again, new leadership means new ways of doing things. And then we do have Senator David Rust from the Tioga area back. Senator Rust has served 5 previous sessions on the Education Committee. He left for a few years to go to Appropriations. He was not on this committee last session, but I think with Don leaving, leadership wanted to bring back a little bit more experience. As you can see, he has twice as much as Senator Elkin, who is the next closest to him. So again, it will be interesting. We'll be doing a lot of education work. In the past, I think, you know, Amy and I have only reached out to membership with action alerts and to ask for emails when we really, really needed it. I kind of have a boy who cried wolf mentality. If I ask you to reach out on every issue, it may sort of soften the impact when we really need to reach out. This session, I expect, will be a little bit different. We're going to need to rely more on the relationships that you have with these individuals locally, because we have not had as long to get to know them and build our own relationships. So we may be doing some more individual reaching out to board members, to superintendents, asking them to reach out to their local legislators. So in addition to new faces, new leadership, new committees, we also have a brand new website. It's a little bit of a sore subject for me right now because the bill tracking system is still not up yet. And I'm getting a little squirmy nervous about it. But again, if you're somebody who likes to follow along, you like to make sure you've looked at the most recent bill copy, or you want to watch the videos of the committee hearings, testify remotely, I would recommend familiarizing yourself with that new website as soon as possible. It's very different from the old website. You know, change is hard, so I'll refrain from passing judgment. I think it will work just fine, but it is very different. Legislators also have new emails. Their emails are all available on the website as they have been in the past, but if you have mailing lists or, you know, the emails of your legislators saved, they are going to be different. Rather than having the at legis.nd.gov, they're going to be at ndlegis.gov. I know that right now, if you email the old address, it is still working, it's forwarding, but I anticipate that will shut off at some point. So you may want to check those as well. Which kind of leads us into how to participate this legislative session. We've talked about this a few times before in other sessions that I've done, but really we want you to stay up to date. We want you to be ready to contact your legislators. If you so choose, we'd love to have you attend hearings, help lobby, and testify. And then we have our NDSBA Legislative Committee that I want to share about a little bit. So staying up to date, we have our Friday email updates. If you have been a school board member for a while, you know that every Friday during the legislative session, it may come late in the afternoon, but it will come. We will have a pretty robust update letting you know the status of all the bills that were heard or passed on the floor that week, and where you can find the most recent version of those bills. We'll also periodically have updates in the bulletin. The most likely one would be a longer crossover update in the February or March issue, just kind of depends how we get those out. And then of course our website, you can always find links to our stuff on our website. And then that new website that I mentioned, ndlegis.gov. On our website on ndsba.org, we have these menus look a little bit different than this photo, but you'll be able to see our hearing schedule there, and a couple of other things. We won't have bill tracking up on this. This is a quick shot of the new website. So in the past, you would have gone to Legislative Assembly and then chosen the current session, which will be the 68th, in order to access all of the information that you'll be looking for this session. That will get you information about the legislators this go around, but if you're looking for bill information, you're going to have to click that session information button, and then there's going to be a much more robust drop-down menu that will get you to hearing schedules, bills, floor agendas, that type of thing. Contacting legislators, how and when. This is something I always like to cover. I think it's important. You know, certainly you can email them on your own. That's quite often the easiest way to do it, I think. But there is a system using the state website, kind of a contact us form, where the state will deliver those emails for you. I discourage folks from using that. It's more personal if you use your own email. I think it's a little bit more complicated to do it through the state website, but it is an option if you know, for whatever reason you're looking to not use your personal email. When emailing legislators, I always encourage you to be clear. Make it known up front who you are, why you care, and what you want them to do. Longer emails are lovely. You may have lots of reasoning, but at the end of the day, legislators receive loads of correspondence from constituents, and they probably are not going to read every word of a 500-word email. They just do not have the time. So, you know, if you are looking to ask them to vote yes or vote no, or, you know, support X, Y, and Z in a budget, say that within your first 2 to 3 sentences. Something that's also important is that letting them know who you are and why you care piece. If I'm a senator out of Grand Forks, I probably am going to spend less time reading an email from someone in Mott Region. But if my school board members or my superintendent from Grand Forks, my constituents email me, those are the ones that matter most to me. So rather than sort of mass blasting legislators, really try to hone in on those that, you know, you have a connection with, whether you have a personal connection or you're a constituent, or your district is a constituent. Those are the ones you really want to focus on. You want to make sure that they know that that's who you are, that you have that connection. And then, of course, be polite, right? You know, a lot of these issues get pretty heated and get pretty tense, but you are representing your district, you're representing school board members. Please always be polite and maintain a sense of decorum. You can also contact folks by phone. If there's somebody you have a relationship with, you may have a cell phone number. Many of them have their personal home phone numbers listed in their contact information on the website. Not surprisingly, most aren't answering that phone. You might get a spouse or a child if you call it during legislative session because they are in Bismarck. But there is also the Legislative Message Center. You dial that 188-ND-LEGIS. They'll ask you which legislator you're looking to get a hold of, and then the phone at their desk rings, but quite likely you will leave a message for them to call back later. If you are interested in attending hearings, this is far easier than it used to be. It no longer requires a trip to Bismarck. All of our hearings are streamed online. I believe all. No, I take that back. I don't think we have video set up in every committee room yet. So a number of them will be streamed online, but I'm not going to promise all just yet. All floor sessions will be streamed online. Those are available to view. Committee hearings, stay tuned. I'm going to say most, but not all. If we are often, looking to pack a room, we have a big issue coming up and we need to show that school board members of the education committee really feel strongly about it. We may send out a sort of rapid response email asking anyone who's able to show up to show up. We don't do that very often, but when we do, unfortunately, we aren't able to give you a whole lot of notice. If there's just a bill that you particularly care about, want to track, or a day that you're going to be in town and want to stop by and see the process, we'd love to have you. You know, if you're tracking that particular bill, watch our Friday updates. If you're just coming to town, let us know. Get a hold of Amy or I, or even Taylor and Lexi in our office, and they'll be able to coordinate with us so that we can make sure that we can find you and make sure you get to where you want to go to watch what you want to watch. And then testifying. Sometimes we will send out a specific request looking for board members to testify on certain issues. But again, you know, if you have an issue that you are tracking specifically and you want to testify, we're happy to have you. My only ask is that you do reach out and let Amy or I know that you plan on coming to testify. That allows us to strategize a little bit and structure our testimony in a complementary way. So I did mention a few slides ago our legislative committee. I'm very grateful to this group of individuals who serve on our NDSBA legislative committee. This committee meets by phone once a week. We go over all of the bills that will be up next week, the hearing schedules, the floor schedules, and Amy and I really look to these individuals to provide us with that sort of like on the ground, real life impact a bill may have. You know, Amy and I often look to, or always look to, our beliefs and policies, the resolutions that delegate assembly adopts in order to guide the stances that we take. But sometimes even more important, or a bigger impact, is knowing how things will affect a local school district on a much smaller molecular level. And so these folks are really our sounding board, and help us make sure we're on the right track in doing that. So you can see in the names I have listed there, I have regions behind them. If you're ever looking to get, you know, a little bit more of a in-depth update and you can't get a hold of Amy or I, or you want to share some feedback on something, reach out to the folks that serve on the committee in your region. If you are in the Southwest region, you've got Carl Lemke, Lucas Kraft, April Duchek, and Michelle Orton. In the Southeast, you've got Patty Stedman, Robin Nelson, and Jason Rohr. In the Northeast, Monty Doppler, Leanne Johnston, Marlana Knudsen, and then which one have I missed? Northwest, you've got Dustin Hager and Rugby, Colette Hertz and Harvey, Mike Lautenschlager at Lewis and Clark District, and any of the other NDSBA board members. They'd be happy to collect that feedback and bring it back to our legislative committee so that we can make sure that we're getting a good feel for how things will affect each of your districts. The topic that you all probably showed up to hear about today, more so than how the session works, is what issues we expect to see. You know, there's a good handful of bills, a few more than this, but these are the ones that I know 100% for sure will come, have sponsors, or I've seen a full draft circulated. Of course, you have all heard probably extensively about Senator Shively's property tax relief funding formula bill. I do have a current copy draft of that. I think it has changed a little bit, but he did submit it to Legislative Council during org session. So I anticipate it will be one of the first bills that will show up when the bill tracking system launches, and we'll probably start work on it quite early in the session. There's also an interim assessment bill coming out of the interim ed policy committee. You may have heard about this by now. Essentially, it will, you know, up from 2009 until 2019, the state mandated that you do a interim assessment. In 2019, we repealed that section in an effort, I believe 2019, in an effort to kind of rework it. This is the rework that's come back. The requirement will change from 1 assessment to 2 assessments per year in certain grade level and subject areas. And then the biggest change is that the state will be creating a state provided assessment that will be available to districts at no charge. If you are currently using a different type of assessment, that quite likely will still be available to you, still meet the requirement, but your district will have to pay for that on your own. The state will cover the cost of the state provided, but if you go a different way, the cost will be and then the data collected from those will go to the SLEDS, SLDS data warehouse, so that when we need to get an overall picture of how we're doing as a state, that data can be incorporated. We did have a meeting yesterday with legislators, DPI, where we kind of expressed concerns about parsing that data out individually by school district. That data is the goal is not necessarily to use that data to evaluate districts, but to tweak or change instruction midway through the year. And so I expect we'll see an amendment early on that would clarify that the data would not be available to DPI or publicly on an individual school basis, just on a whole state basis. So that will be an interesting one to watch. In addition, we have a cybersecurity curriculum bill. Again, you've probably heard about this one. It was going through the Ed Policy Committee. They did not forward it on, but I anticipate a legislator will likely introduce it instead. My probably biggest hunch would be Schreiber-Beck prime sponsoring that bill. I think I know we'll see a signing bonus bill. This would align with the resolution delegate assembly passed at our October convention, giving boards a little bit more flexibility in how they provide signing bonuses for high need positions. Senator Meyer out of Grand Forks has been working on a bill that would loosen up our qualifications for board members on military installations. He's worked with us quite a bit on that bill, and I think it will be I hope it will be a good stab at fixing some of the turnover issues we have on military boards. And then there's a campaign finance bill coming. Representative Carla Rose Hansen out of Fargo drafted it, but I believe Liz Conley will prime sponsor it. Essentially would require a finance report of school board members during their campaign. Much like city and county officials are asked to report that finance. I do believe it will be limited to candidates for boards that serve 1,000 students or more. It might be 750 or 1,000. Essentially, it's probably going to be our largest 15 to 20 schools. And then you would provide that finance report to your business manager, just like you provide all of the other forms. So not sure if it will pass yet, but that's I think the draft that we're looking at. Any questions on those before I go on to the next bunch? Oh, I see Chris in the questions. Mr. Dyke is from Williston, so I wasn't even close. I was thinking he was Fargo and Grand Forks. That tells you I need to be studying up on my freshmen. Okay. As I mentioned, the first week of December, we had board session. As part of that, the governor provided his budget address and outlined his budget proposal for the session. Of course, it is his proposal. Most governors in North Dakota have historically not gotten everything they have proposed, not close, but it's a good starting point to know where the governor's office will be coming from. He did recommend a 4% and 3% per pupil increase, 4% in the first year of the biennium, 3% in the second. Included in that proposal was a recommendation that 70% of new monies go only towards teacher salaries. We saw this last legislative session. We saw that requirement with the per pupil increase as well. It's not my favorite thing. I think that school boards and school districts need the local control to decide how they need to spend their money in order to keep their lights on. I think this scenario is probably manageable, but it's not my favorite trend, I guess, that we're seeing. He also recommended moving to on-time funding immediately. You may remember that we kind of are making that transition over a number of years, something that we adopted in the 19 session. His recommendation is to just rip the Band-Aid off and do it now. He's also recommended bringing all transition maximum districts onto the formula as soon as possible. And then providing Bank of North Dakota borrowing authority to the CTE boards groups for those academy projects that were awarded grant funding in March of this year. Both the 2021 legislature and then again in the special session appropriated federal funding for those projects, but the feds have not released all of the dollars yet. And so if you know, have a construction project going on in your district, or you've even bought, you know, a pallet of wood in the past 12 months, you know that construction costs are increasing, interest rates are increasing. We've got plenty of inflation, and those projects are getting more and more expensive the longer we wait for those federal dollars. So our hope and one of our priorities this legislative session, whether it's borrowing authority, additional turn back money that is available, or other funds be made available so that these projects can really get going and take advantage of the plans, the private match dollars, and the best interest rates that they can. And then he included in his budget proposal a $250 million appropriation for PERS in order to get closer to closing the gap on the unfunded liability. But he did state support for closing the defined benefit plan in favor of a defined contribution plan. I know that has been one of probably the biggest issues that we have talked about in the interim. I'm just looking at a question here. Does NDSBA have any position at this point regarding any proposed changes to PERS? The unfunded liability is close to 1.9 billion. Yeah, Chris, that's correct or close. The last figure I saw was about 1.8 billion for the unfunded liability. We did adopt a policy resolution this October that basically says we support appropriately and adequately funding. It does not pigeonhole us into taking a position to support or oppose defined contribution versus defined benefit. But we, you know, overall, we will be looking to be sure that whatever plan or changes are made doesn't harm the individuals, the public school employees that are in the system now, doesn't overly burden school districts in closing the gap or, you know, providing contributions, and then, you know, just adequately funds whatever retirement program exists going forward. You know, if you look at it as a whole, most of our employees are under the TFFR program versus the PERS program. We still do have quite a number of employees on PERS. TFFR is in much better shape. They're on track to be fully funded by 2078. The legislature put a big influx of dollars into that program in the 2013 session. Wish we would have done it for PERS. But one of the bigger concerns that we have is that, you know, any changes you make to PERS, it's not impossible that we'll consider those changes to TFFR down the road. If PERS becomes defined contribution, I would anticipate at some point, no matter how good shape TFFR is in, the legislature may have that same conversation. So we'll kind of be looking at it from that standpoint. The chair of the retirement committee, this interim, who is fully supportive of moving to a defined contribution plan, is now our House Majority Leader. So I would anticipate that defined contribution is going to gain quite a fair amount of traction. Okay. Other issues, and I don't have a slide to outline them all because it is continually changing. So other issues that we anticipate to see are some bills that would help provide school districts with more staffing flexibility. In addition to that sign-on bonus one, maybe we'll look at some short-term contract type things where if you've got grant money or ESSER funds, you would not be subject to the same sort of continuing contract issues that we see with regular contracts. Mental health. I know a lot of you are facing issues where, you have students that are dangerous to themselves, students, other staff members, and there's no services available to take them to provide them the services they need, and so they end up back in the classroom. I think we'll see quite a few voucher bills or tax credit bills, ways to attempt to send public money to private or parochial schools. We will oppose those. We have always opposed those. Our take is not so much that you can't provide tax credits or send money to those folks, but if you're going to do that, then they have to follow the same rules that public schools do. They can't turn any students away. They have all of the same reporting requirements. If you want to take advantage of public funds, you have to follow the public rules. But we'll see how that goes. I think there will be a number of bills about bonds, property taxes. You've likely heard the income tax proposals in the news. We may also see a parental bill of rights. This is something that's kind of been popping up across the country the last few years since COVID. Essentially a statement that, parents have a right to be involved in their students' education, make decisions for their kids. None of it are things that we don't believe in, I think, as NDSBA or as school board members. So some states have used those to try to maybe, find reasons to litigate school districts because they then would say that those rights have been violated. But I think our North Dakota districts do a pretty good job of ensuring that their parents are. Of course, we will see a critical race theory bill. We've had a number of legislators during the administrative rule writing process that we went through this fall state that they would be bringing a bill to change or modify the law that was passed in the November 2021 special session. I think Jim Casper from Fargo for sure will have one, if not others. We'll probably see bills on transgender issues. I did get a note from the Tribune a couple weeks ago on a bill coming from legislator out of Minot. It's more about gender affirmation surgery, but finds a way to lump public school districts and school boards in as well. We'll probably see a bill or two on professional development topics. We see this every legislative session. Somebody has an issue they care about. They think it's really important that we train all teachers on, and go round and round about the best way to spend our professional development time and money. Our hope would be, the state mandates 8 hours of professional development, but provides you with a list of topics you can choose from to meet that requirement. Our hope is that any new topics just either get added to that list or we just go full local control and allow you to choose. Of course, many of you are doing more than 8 hours, but on the things that your districts and your teachers really need. So the further we can move the needle in that direction, the better. Then Pledge of Allegiance, right? We all saw the news stories there. I think that we will see a bill addressing Pledge of Allegiance in board meetings. Last I heard, it would be for all political subdivisions or all meetings of elected officials in the state, but haven't seen anything on paper yet. And then, of course, our old friend restraint and seclusion. I think we'll see another bill that would attempt to mandate a restraint and seclusion policy. So that's really just kind of a quick and dirty list of what I think we'll see. I think there are going to be a lot of bills in our tracking list this year, a lot of issues that we're going to have to work on. Education has been kind of focus point for the last couple of years. As I was preparing these slides, I was looking at slides from a previous session where we had tracked, I believe, It was 88 primary bills, and I would not be surprised to see that number crack. Hopefully I'm just being a negative Nancy, and there won't be that many, but I won't be surprised. I think we have a lot of freshmen that are really excited to sponsor some bills, and so I won't be surprised to see that total bill number really climb to heights we haven't seen, at least in the last few years. So with that, I guess I would just take any questions that you might have. Again, just a reminder, Amy and I will be leading the legislative advocacy efforts for NDSBA. You're more than welcome to reach out to us, share an opinion at any point. Taylor in our office and Lexi, who just joined us last week, will also be helping out with the report and different committees. So if you can't get a hold of us, you can certainly reach out to them too, and they may be able to help you out. But I kind of wanted to save the last few minutes in case anybody had any questions. So at this point, I'd be happy to take your questions or give you your time back. Taylor, I'm not seeing any questions. Are you?
I see one.
Oh, there we go. Right, Steve Swantek is not the superintendent at Larimore. Sonia, how did I screw that up? Did he retire and I didn't know, or did I screw up the district? I'll figure that out. He's recently been a superintendent. I'll have to track down where I'm behind there. I also am admittedly not great at my North Dakota geography, so it's a different Steve Swantek.
It's a difference.
Am I that confused? Okay. All right. Sonia, you have given me homework. I appreciate that very much. All right. Anything else? Okay. I don't see anything. Thanks. Oh. Sonia says, well, that's good news. And Sonia says the real Steve Swantek is a great guy and will be our friend. I am happy to hear that. I like that.
Good stuff.
Okay. All right. Well, have a great rest of your week. Thank you for joining us. We will have our first quarter 2023 brunch and learn topics out likely the first week of January. So watch your email for that. And as always, if there is a topic you are looking to see us cover in a brunch and learn, go ahead and shoot Taylor an email and we'd be happy to set something up. So have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, everyone. Happy holidays.